Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Coach's Corner episode, or Coach's Corner segment of the Bridging Impact podcast. I'm your host, Coach Furtado, where in Coach's Corner, I often talk about what I am learning from the week as a youth basketball coach and director of training and in charge of training the coaches at Royal Basketball School. So with that being said, I want to talk about communication this week because, you've heard about it before. We hear about it time in and time again about how important communication is, but I kind of want to break down what, a couple of different tangible things that you can take away and you can practice in terms of your communication, because I feel like, I feel like I've become a better communicator, ever since I started creating content. Like writing and like speaking and trying to get my point across has really helped me articulate in how I, approach summer camp and how I direct and work with youth and work with coaches. But there's always room for improvement. But here are a few things that I've found for some people to be kind of challenged with, and some things that I think everyone can improve upon, because there are some, I feel like just characteristics and traits that make people better communicators, than others. I believe there are strengths, but these 3 tips that I'm going to share can be applied by anyone. And number 1 is common language. So what do I mean by common language? I mean, I'm going to use basketball as an example. Common language is the terminology that one group uses, right? So when I am teaching terminology, the game of basketball, to a game of 4 and 5 year olds, I'm going to use different terminology than to my 10 to 14 year olds. And it's the same thing for baseball and football, right? They have their own terminology. So you have to define what the common language is. And you have to define what each word means, because right now I am starting to coach at Venice, and they're starting to use different language in the game of basketball that I didn't use when I was playing varsity basketball. So I've had to come across and learn. And so an example, a story about common language is when I am working with the 1st and 2nd graders. When I was at the Boys and Girls Club, we had to go through our common language and our common, kind of goals with the 1st and 2nd graders and with Boys and Girls Club standards. So, talking about the 3-touch rule, right? Because a lot of times, you'll have different, physical touch rules, body space, right? But they have to get acclimated to the 3-touch rule: high five, fist bump, and side hug. And now I'm implementing that at summer camp. And so how you can make sure that, at your work, when you're leading your team, and maybe you're not even the leader of your team, but you got to make sure that when you're explaining something to a group of people, to your team, that they understand what you mean by what you say. So it's being really, really clear and simple. And so that leads me into my second one, is being very specific. And this is something that I've noticed definitely myself, and I've had the opportunity to kind of witness in a few other coaches as well, is that sometimes they say, stop doing that. They say, let's go over here, and all right, here's your water break, come back, right? All of those three sayings are very vague, right? We have to be super specific. All right, we're taking water, you have 30 seconds, then I want you back on the baseline, the black line at the end, right? You got the terminology now, so they understand where the baseline is, right? And if stop doing that, what is that? Stop, putting your hands on another person. That's breaking the 3-touch rule. What can we do about it, right? We're communicating something specifically. And this is something, again, an issue we're having this week with the coaches, and that I think is on us, is we're show up early to work. Okay, what is early? What time do you want us there? You want us there at 8:45, 8:52, 8:30, 8:15? Which is it, right? We have to be very specific about it, and understanding that will help our people then become even more understanding of what we're talking about. And that way there will be less confusion, because when we communicate vaguely, what happens is confusion, and confusion leads to resentment, and resentment breaks down trust of a team. So communication is so important. All right. And the last one, number 3, is tone and body language. So let's look at me right now. I'm in a tone. I'm just talking to you right now, the person that's listening to this, and working with your teams, your youth. And so with that, I'm trying to be direct. I'm trying to be concise, right? but I'm not trying to inspire. This is not necessarily, well, it is inspirational, but I'm trying to kind of communicate information versus like if I was trying to inspire you, it would have maybe a different tone. Or if I was trying to reprimand you and keep you accountable, I would have a different tone. You notice how like I kind of get in the grill a little bit more using my hands, right? I'm a very active hand person. Like that's just who I am. That may not be you. But with that being said, body language and tone are everything. Actually, over 50% of our communication is through body language. A lot of times I try and communicate just with my hands without having to say anything with our body language. So I'll tell you a story about when I was an intern for the Boys and Girls Club my junior year. And as an intern, one second here. All right, we're good. As an intern, I was in a meeting with a big donor, and I was sitting there crossing my arms. And if you're just listening to the podcast, you can't see me crossing my arms here in my car. But that I had a supervisor come and tell me like, hey, that shows this donor that you don't care. So I had to learn that like my body language when I'm up, I'm bringing my shoulders back. Hey, yoga helps me with my posture a lot, and just making sure that, you know, our message that we communicate really matters, and our body posture and tone, right? Stop what you're doing, right? You shouldn't use that the first time. Now, if you ask someone 3 times, sometimes you gotta reuse the tone. Same with people that talk monotone, right? Like when you are telling a story, when you're trying to engage people, right? You can't use the same tone the whole time, right? Maybe I'm even doing that right now. Maybe I'm using too much of the same tone. So I gotta switch it up so that you can lock in and focus. So those are just some tools, and an extra one that we've heard before is over communicate. I get to learn this one really well with kids, but even with coaches too, is that you have to emphasize what's really important, and you have to over communicate what you really want to either be done or where they should be, right? And the rules, and you just have to set constant reminders and over communicate. Because what I really like what John Gordon says, and if there's a lack of communication, a negativity will fill the void. So then people will start talking. So that's definitely a frustrating thing. So if we can over communicate, everyone always talks about that. It's sometimes more challenging. It's not always going to be perfect, but those are a couple of tips. I'd love for you to drop any other communication tips you have in the comments here on the YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast form, whether it's Apple or Spotify, tag me. I love to have a conversation on communication. It's something I'm really passionate about. And yeah, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. You give us a review on Apple Podcasts, and you follow us and subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify as well. It's how we grow. We're trying to get the message out and really impact the youth of the next generation. That's what I'm all about. I'm passing that wisdom along that was passed to me, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you, or maybe you'll be listening next Friday as well. Appreciate y'all.